Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today. Whoa! Preview in July. Holy smokes. So in the before times, ladies and gentlemen, when things were normal, myself and many other creators and members of the press would travel to various cities, states, and countries to see games that you were most looking forward to and then deliver our preview content. You fast forward to 2020 where 2020 happened. And yeah, things went to a standstill. So here we are for the first time since August 2020, in my case, doing a preview almost a full year later. It's very uncommon this happens, so pardon some of my shock and awe in this moment. But Xbox invited me in to check out Double Fine's Psychonauts 2. Double Fine, of course, being a Xbox first-party studio now, but this is a multi-plat release. However, I thought, given my Xbox coverage, a lot of you would be curious of my thoughts on the title, especially as someone who has zero history with Psychonauts. You can play Psychonauts 1 on your Series X or your Xbox One. It's available via backwards compatibility. It's also on Game Pass, so you can check it out if you're curious. The sequel does have a great recap that I just want to quickly shout out. As someone who knows nothing about this series, I was able to hop in and familiarize myself with things pretty quickly, but there are ways to experience the history of this series. Now, I played this on the Xbox Series X, the only next-gen version of the game available. They don't have a PlayStation 5 version. You're just going to be playing the PS4 version on your PS5 if you pick it up over there, so do keep that in mind. But the too long didn't read of this entire preview is that, number one, don't write off Psychonauts 2 because it's actually much deeper than you would ever anticipate. At least for me stepping in, I did not expect half the stuff that came my way. Number two, this is a rare preview moment where with this game coming out August 25th, next month, I had the opportunity to play 3 to 4 hours of the game if I wanted to. But after playing for an hour and a half, I laid the controller down and said, I've seen enough. I'm excited for this game, and I'm going to wait until I can put my whole hands on the entire game to then play it through and experience it how most of you would, because I think that's very important. So just keep all of that in mind as we move through. And now let's get it started. First thing that caught my attention was right off the bat, they give you a mental health advisory. They warn you of some of the subjects it's going to get into, but they also indicate that the game's about empathy and healing. And I thought to myself, wow, this game's going to tackle some tough themes. I really didn't expect that, but it makes a lot of sense given that the Psychonauts dive into people's brains, and a lot of the wit from this game comes from its labeling. So by that I mean stuff like the abilities you get, the enemy types you fight, all of it keys into mental health, which happens to be something I'm very passionate about, but also something that they do in a really charming way. So let's get into enemy types because it touches into combat and we can get rolling from there. Some of the enemy types that I fought: censors, regrets, doubts. And you would have to fight these enemies in different ways. Like, for example, the censors would be taken out easier if you use telekinesis and stun them and then beat them up. Whereas doubts would slow you down. They were these oily kind of creatures, so you'd have to use fire on them. And then the regrets would be these creatures with anvils in their hands, and you'd have to shoot them. Get it? Because it's weighing you down. Like, there's so much thematic emphasis across the entire design of the game, and I really appreciate it because from the outside looking in, and maybe other people were on the same page as me, I wrote it off kind of quickly as this kind of psychedelic acid trip like 3D platformer. I was like, all right, that could be pretty fun if the gameplay mechanics are cool. But it's the wit of how I said they label things. It's even the writing and the performances in this game that I think carry it to a new level where I was really enjoying myself. Like I said, so much that I said, hey, I have a chance to play even more of this. I don't know if any of it would carry over, but I have a chance to play more of this. I'm going to just leave the controller here, and we're going to go into our preview with arguably less knowledge about the game than most players out there. So keep that in mind if you want to watch other previews. I always encourage that anyway, but I've played probably considerably less than others. I went through 3 full levels. So I went through the introductory level of Dr. Lobato's dentistry. I went through the mother lobe, and then I went through Forsyth's brain as well. And each of these levels, once again, they look like these wild acid trips, but they key into emotions that these characters are tangled up with, also their occupations. And so For example, you have the Our Lady of Great Restraint Hospital, where Dr. Forsyth is this caretaker of you and other interns in the Psychonauts program, and she doesn't want you to go on this mission, and she's very much about restraint. And so then you go into her brain for a class session, and as the main character, you use your new mental connections ability to connect her brain from money to stress, and effectively start to create the main villain through the game's mechanics. There's just something about that connection between narrative and gameplay that is so powerful here, and it, like I said, really does elevate it. But what also helps its story is its Tim Burton-like character models with its Pixar-like animation and acting. Now, it's not silky smooth, but it brings these characters to life in a way I would define similar to a Lego game, where they are very lifelike, if not a little choppy. But that's okay because, like I said, the voice performances are fantastic. And I know a lot of people compared, say, Ratchet and Clank to a Pixar movie. I thought it was more of a Pixar movie in its visual presentation, not really in the acting and the camaraderie and the back and forth between characters. There is this level of strange humor in Psychonauts 2 and these engagements that these characters get into that are so natural yet strange. Something like this.
Everybody has those. Live in your mind and stamp out things that don't belong.
Like us?
You handle this one. I'll find a way out.
And those mental connections even go into stuff like the collectibles. So you're going to collect things called figments, like figments of the imagination, emotional baggage, memory vaults, which are, of course, backstories to some of the things that these characters have gone through. I really like this because the game necessarily doesn't directly tell you. They go on with their own story path, while these collectibles can actually fill things out, and it encourages you to explore more, to use your powers in creative ways. You can use fire to burn down pictures and get into secret areas and hallways. And of course, there are many other ways you can explore the worlds that you go to. You can also find half a minds inside people's brains. So when people say, I got half a mind to say, and you put two half a minds together, you get a whole mind and your health upgrades. Like I said, I may just be a sucker for this type of stuff. I really might be. But there's so many things to acquire, so much to do. It's a really full game. So let's talk a little bit about the Mother Lobe, which is this almost hub area in Psychonauts 2, where I believe more things unlock as you progress deeper into the story and you return here. But I was running around and there was just so much I could do with already the limited powers I had. I could use clairvoyance to tap into someone's brain and see things that only they could see, like bacon flying everywhere, or something as strange as tapping into a rat and then finding a hole in the wall and finding different materials to then upgrade myself. Yes, even in this game, there's this machine called the Automatic, where you can combine new items to, say, make a core, where if you find challenge cards all throughout the level, you can rank up. And then when you rank up, you can, as the name would suggest, just rank up your abilities, make them better. So you can hit harder with TK, so you can burn more with fire. And also you can buy pins, which will augment all these different abilities I'm talking about to fit your playstyle even more. So there is a level of agency there, but once again, it's not just a 3D platformer, quite like I was expecting it to be, a weird 3D platformer, and then it develops more and more and more, and I just couldn't help but smile my whole way through this preview. There are also optional missions that you can take on. They're more along the lines of collectathons, which is in theme with the rest of the game. So if you are into collectathons, I can already say this game's a pretty easy recommendation because they're all over the place. I think it's a good time for one because I always touch on one thing with our industry that we've sort of fallen into for the last half a decade, which is this obsession with heavy open world titles that are trying to tell you a deep story. And this game in a lot of ways does touch on darker themes, but it still manages to be uplifting. And we don't have a lot of crazy 3D platformers doing fun things quite like Psychonauts 2 is doing. So I really tip my cap that they're doing something unique here, and that, of course, this was back through Kickstarter and Fig and all that stuff, but I know Xbox has helped fund this game, and I give them credit for letting them do something like this. And I hope they continue to do games like these because 3D platformers are much more rare than they should be. I mean, that was a whole era in the PS2 days and the GameCube days, the original Xbox days. everyone had 3D platformers. Those were the open world games of that era, where you could have probably felt some fatigue back then if you were a true critic then, where I was like 8 years old. So I was having a blast, man. So for me, this was also like a blast from the past. It was really nice to have a competent 3D platformer. On the complaint side of things, I don't think I experienced enough to have really strong complaints, but I will say one thing that I think will be a problem for people is the TK ability. You can't really target objects specifically that you want to pick up. So there were a couple of times in combat I was trying to lift up certain objects, but I was ending up pulling teeth instead that I couldn't lift. Maybe because my TK was not strong enough, so this could be something you may rank out of. I'm not quite sure. But I noticed that this could be a problem because to take out those sensors, you didn't have to do it this way, but it would stop them enough to make it easier. You would use your TK to stun them. And if you couldn't pick up the right objects to stun them, I took a couple of unnecessary hits when I didn't really mean to. So that was one thing. The other is just maybe the weird zany nature of the game is going to put some people off. I think there's something worth embracing here. You can see a lot of the inspirations worn on its sleeve. Like I said, that Tim Burton vibe is just all over this game, in my opinion at least. I could be entirely wrong, but those character models just scream that to me. And I really had a good time with this game from top to bottom. I'm looking very much forward to it. It's a day one Game Pass game, so this is shaping up to be a great addition to that library at the very least. I mean, the game even has pretty neat puzzles with the mental connections where you're going to be zipping around different thoughts. And there's a fast travel system within the main hub area, which makes exploration easier. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff here that I didn't anticipate, but really caught me off guard. So in turn, my final thoughts on Psychonauts 2 are that I really enjoyed the game. Quite a bit, actually. And so a tip of the cap to Double Fine so far for surprising me, because I'm sure a lot of people had written this game off. So I'm looking forward to the final release of it. Once again, day one Game Pass. It's going to be there, so you can check it out if you're an Xbox owner. And other than that, I leave it to all of you. What do you think of what I had to say about Psychonauts 2 in the comments down below? Any questions, anything I missed, let me know. I try to be as thorough as possible with these types of previews. But until then, I'll talk with all of you very soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.